All right, welcome everyone. Can everyone hear me? Hopefully I don't have too bad a network quality, but if I do, I apologize in advance. I think the kids are watching some Netflix. So anyway, first of all, welcome everyone to Brisbane Azure User Group. This is the September edition of the online user group. Unfortunately, we don't have an international meetup tonight, but we've got something even better. So, first of all, let's thank our sponsors. So, without our sponsors, this wouldn't be possible. So, Codify, they've been great. They've continued to support us throughout this challenging times, and Microsoft obviously are always there for us to help put together this user group. So, thank you very much. It's fantastic. Getting involved. So it's really important that we come together as a community, especially as we're going in this online forum. Things aren't as easy as what they were before, but that's no excuse. We want to make sure that we can do things in a nice way and have a great event. So getting involved is really important, and it's great if you guys could reach out if you've got something to share. We've got the Unconvention Night coming up soon. That's in December, but we're still looking for somebody in November. We've got October sorted, so that's really awesome. And tonight we've got a wonderful presentation by Johannes, so that I'm looking forward to that a lot. So yeah, definitely reach out if you think you've got something to share. We're still looking for somebody for November, and then this next year. Alrighty, so there's the address. Just reach out, let us know. Okay, a few updates before we get into the main event. Hasn't been a lot happening this month, but I think we're building up to an event that's coming up soon. But there has been a few things. So AWS cost management and billing, that's been in preview for quite a while. So that's actually finally gone GA, so that's really good to know. You can actually now start seeing your AWS costs in Azure, and it provides the same experience that you're familiar with for Azure, so that's really good. Spring Cloud. So for all of you Java devs out there, Spring Cloud is a fully managed environment that allows you to take advantage of all of their infrastructure that they're putting together. You can even leverage it in a isolated setup. It's got lots and lots of benefits, and the infrastructure is already rolled, so you don't have to waste a lot of time, getting everything up and running. And it's got some fairly awesome telemetry available through Spring Cloud. So it gives you all the benefits of being able to do ingress, egress, your apps, hybrid development deployments. We talked about the networking, and secure communication. All out of the box, so it's pretty cool. That's pretty much it for tonight. So just quickly, API days, that's coming up September 15 and 16, so lock yourselves in for that. That's awesome. We had last month one of the co-producers of API days present, so it's really cool. It's free too. So anyway, so this one here might be the one that's taking all of the news this month. So I have a feeling there might be a few things coming very soon that could be pretty cool. Alrighty, so some resources for us. As usual, Slack, YouTube, and our on-demand training. They're great places to get started if you're just learning about Azure and you want to get your toes wet in the ocean of this massive cloud. And then there's some blogs. So these blogs here, if you want to get started, I certainly recommend the blogs. I think they're really great. So the Scots, obviously, they do a great job, and the Azure blog itself, it's got a lot of news in it. Alrighty, so without any further ado, Blazor'ing'ly simple, secure application development with immutable infrastructure. So that's a wordful. So we got Johannes Strydom. So Johannes has been in the industry for over 25 years. He's an awesome guy, and he brings a huge amount of experience to .NET, to Azure. He's quite an amazing person when you meet him, and he's got a wonderful presentation about some of this really cool emerging technology. So without any further ado, let's share your screen, Johannes.
Thank you. I will do. Share. And he asked me a stupid question. Do you really want to share? Of course I do. Good night, everybody. It's very exciting to be here. I haven't done anything like this for many years. In my SAP days, I did this quite often. And even after that, I did this type of thing, travel the world. And yes, I'm excited to be here. Now, in the recent years, as we all know, getting to the cloud is imperative. And this, obviously, we know there's many different tools, but my tool of choice is, of course, Azure. Now, the objectives of this presentation, I want to just tap on another new thing, relatively new, Blazor. Blazor is awesome. What do you call it? One-page application framework, single-page application framework, all in .NET. That's the wonderful part. We don't have to do all in JavaScript anymore. I don't say don't do it, but we don't have to stick with that. So what we want to talk about is basically what is Blazor. This talk is not really about Blazor. It's about Azure Infrastructure as code, as a service, and then ARM templates and deployment and DevOps. But we need something like Blazor or any kind of application that we want to put in the cloud. So Blazor is a SPA framework, and it's a really simplified development effort. We use it in DJAG quite extensively and with huge success. It integrates well with all Microsoft technologies. There is some gotchas every here and there, like everything else. But once you work it out, it's working very well. And the other side of server-side or client-side Blazor, I will talk a little bit about the hosting frameworks or hosting. Oh, I can't remember the right word now. Shame on me. Okay, but client-side Blazor also support progressive web application. I will demonstrate that also tonight. And we will talk about total automation. Total automation is when, and I will show the picture. I do have it somewhere. Yeah, in the next slide or the next page. Continuous improvement. What's important? How do we get there? And how can we easily maintain it? And then I just want to dab on Azure Application Insights, in particular, Azure Application Insights. We had to talk about that recently, but I thought there's a fair bit missing from that discussion. And this really warrants another talk about Application Insights. Okay, the next part. Development. Now, Blazor is, as I said, is a framework supported C#, HTML, and CSS. So that makes it a full stack C# framework. And there's basically two hosting models. One is Blazor Server, which then use Signal R, and I specifically use Azure Signal R servers as the preferred option. It's much faster than the out-of-box Azure, ASP.NET Core Signal R, which is quite slow if you're happy with that. And then the shining star of the Blazor framework is WebAssembly. WebAssembly is the emerging technology, which is totally supported by most of the favorite browsers. And when you spin up a Blazor WebAssembly application, You can also then select if you want to have progressive web application capability, and it will just be there. You don't really have to do much. Now, for total automation, one of the most important parts which most teams and most projects, because of there's always constraints about time, money saving, pay. But if you don't do stuff properly, you're not saving money, you're spending money. So you need to have a rigorous process that you should not you should not change or veer any inch from it. And that process should include any kind of the E2E or BDD test frameworks, which make sure that your application, if something's changed on the screen, that it doesn't have an adverse effect on your application in total, especially when you have applications that's public facing. It is really disturbing to find I made a change and it actually broke my application terribly. And to fix that, it's normally the challenge. And well, it's normally not the challenge. The challenge is to manage your user base, to keep the people. You want to retain your user base. You don't want to lose your user base due to a test that has failed and broke your application. You didn't realize that. Or maybe a test that wasn't even done. Now what a typical continuous deployment process is something like this. Everybody should have Azure boards and backlogs and work items. I don't have this solution, but we will forgive myself for that. So the team will normally work on the backlog of work items and assign developers to the task. Developers will jump into Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, or whatever application or code base they use, and they push the changes to Azure repo, which is normally Git. And by choice, that should trigger a build. Or if it does not, then a build should be manually triggered. But automation is about things that are happening automatically. So pushing a change to Azure repo will trigger a build and the Azure build pipeline. And the pipeline normally goes through this typical process where it will firstly get the source code, and because normally this will run on a hosted, oh my goodness, what's the word? Hosted service. Let's call it that. It's got a better name. Then it will install the required tools. Maybe you need to have NuGet package management in there, or you also need to have a specific version of .NET Core or something like that. Then it install all the dependencies, it do the build, and if it fails in any of those stages, your build will go nowhere. But normally, if you've done your job well from the start, right through pushing code to your repository, and your tests are still intact, then it will just run, build, and run your tests, and it will package up your artifacts and then publish your artifacts into the Azure Artifact Store. I can't remember the exact name for that at the moment. Forgive me, I have a very short memory. And then when that build is completed, it will then trigger a release, which will then start a release process in the Azure release pipeline, which the first thing it does, it pulls down the artifacts needed in this process. Now, a typical deploy process is something similar to the actual build process, but that can be it can be complicated, it can be simple. Typically, things like we do is we make sure that our infrastructure is always deployed first in a step like this, and then making sure if there's any changes or additive changes to our infrastructure, that will get added. If we remove something from our infrastructure, it's always a good idea to drop your infrastructure first and then redeploy from fresh. But I'll explain that a little bit better later. And then The first step will always be to have a development environment where the basic testing can be done by a testing team or the developer themselves. And once they're happy with that, they inform the approvers and the gate managers of the next step that things are for go. And then they will approve a typical test manager will then approve the changes to go to the change environment, the quality assurance environment, and the identical steps that was followed in the deploy to dev process will be repeated in both the QA and deploy to PRD eventually. Then it will deploy to the actual Azure environment, which is this is typically 3 different subscriptions. In my case, I only have one, so I won't be able to show all this, but I can show you at least the first step. Typically, you will have 3 different Azure subscriptions, which will then based on naming convention, and that's when I will come to what is in a name in Azure. And having a successful infrastructure deployment, naming is imperative. It is absolutely important. Right, so the next thing we want to talk about, obviously, is infrastructure as a service. What is important to make this work? Obviously, we need to have agreed upon architecture. I will show you the couple of templates that we use and typical infrastructures which are actually supported by most architects, and also that's typical infrastructures that is proposed by Microsoft themselves. Important is you need to have a workable naming convention. And what I always try to do, I know there's many more tools like ARM templates and PowerShell, like there's things like Ansible, Kubernetes, which I'm not a very great favor of some of these, because some of these are really complicated and they only really support very specific, complicated or unusual scenarios. Right. So a typical naming convention that we use is we keep it as simple as possible and try to stick to what the way Microsoft are naming their stuff. Like in my case, I've got a company, and this project, as you can see, the name is Incredible Adventure, because my journey till now has been a incredible adventure. Now, as you can see here, as I suggest, you need a small short acronym or a prefix or a suffix or whatever you want to call it for your company or organization name. And secondly, you want to know what that specific resource, where it's deployed to, our dev environment, our test environment, or your production subscription. I should say it's more correct to say subscription. But yes, environment is good. And then we want to know where the data centers are that we are using for this application, and the typical convention in Azure as well: SY for Sydney, Hong Kong, HK for Hong Kong, SG for Singapore, etc. And then every resource type, which is a resource group, a key vault, a database server, app service plan, app service, etc., has got a specific type acronyms. Like for resource group, it sort of makes logical sense to say RG. Key vault, logical sense to say KV. SQL Server, etc. Now, all these things are very, very important. When you do your infrastructure templates, it then becomes easy to manage it by typically only just the name changes of the application. And typically what I have, this is my template I use for this specific purpose as well. As you can see, there's a whole heap of parameters in here. Some of them is defaulted like that. And that's what makes it easy. I can have default values in here. and make sure that every time I deploy, those things are not changing. And even for our key vaults, we need to give certain individuals or service principals access to be able to access our secrets and stuff. And all of this is happening in infrastructure. And typically what I say also, I don't want anybody in the organization to touch passwords ever or create passwords. All of that should be and must be managed through your deployment process. Okay, so this is a lot said and in a couple of minutes. So if anybody's got questions right now, we'll take a break for maybe 2 or 3 minutes and collect questions if there's any.
Actually, there are no questions at the moment, Johannes.
Cool. Can I see it? Can I see it?
If you go into the Q&A, yes, window, you should be able to see.
Oh, there. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, what's I can't see anything else than just this. I might have to take.
No, that's correct. That's all the questions that we have at the moment. So
Okay.
None specific to your presentation.
Fair enough.
But just so everybody knows, if you have any questions, just type them in the QA. That's part of the event, and we'll address them at the next break.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay, so how do I go back to that? Go. I can't seem to keep on sharing my screen. Well, it's still shared, but there I am. Sorry. All right, so let's continue. Now, the typical architectures that we are looking, or this specific application are using, is this architecture, where we have a SQL Server, a Key Vault, a resource group, and a business tenancy, which is in this case Azure subscription, front door, Application Insights, Azure SignalR. This application does not really need a SignalR, but because it's our default template to be used for scalable web applications, it will be there. You don't get costed for it because it's a as use based service. And if it doesn't get used at all, it's there, but it's not used. So we've got this app service plan as well, and the web app. And then in front, we designate that, yes, this application is able to, I should have done something first. And I thought about that before we started, and I didn't do that. So just because there's always a, what is the word? A demo god that controls our lives, we need to make sure that things work in time for us. So what I want to do, and I need to share that as well. Let me just minimize this quickly. Just want to share in Azure what I have in my resource group. And as you can see, that is me. And I've got a subscription here, and it's called Incredible Adventure. And if I look inside of that, there is nothing really, nothing created. I've got nothing, not even the resource group. And I'm not going to even create one because the actual deployment will do that for me. All right. So here we've got our release pipeline. And if I quickly show you what the content of that looks like, as I've got only one environment, as I said before, I should have actually probably expanded to at least 2, but I must be careful. It can cost me money, and I owe Microsoft a huge $5 at the moment. Okay, so this is basically a ARM template, which I showed you before, and then because we want to connect to App Insights, we create an App Insights key with a PowerShell script, which then also push it to our Key Vault. And we use our Key Vault to actually extract what information we need in our app service. Okay, So without further ado, I will just create a release for this guy and let it go. Okay, and yes, I like it extremely. Go. So this will take about maybe 5 minutes. So I will not dwell on that for further. So let's go back to our wiki. And that's the other thing. This is probably I'm probably the only one, or maybe the first one in this group that didn't use the slideshow, because I thought, well, I've got everything in one spot. I can just do it here, right? So that's our scalable architecture that hopefully everybody can see. I didn't even ask that question. Everybody can see it properly. All right. So
yes, we can.
Okay, if it's okay for everybody, please. If it was not okay, please, I ask for forgiveness. And then there's the other architecture what we generally use is a high availability active failover, and it uses database failover groups. And again, when we deploy this, we create one resource group in one data center, which holds all these resources. And the standby region is normally, in our case, will be Melbourne, where we create a second set of web app service plans, app service plan, a web app, a database SQL Server, and a database for high availability. And also the rest of it's all identical. If that is a PWA, it will be PWA enabled, or if it's Blazor server-side application, it will just be a normal web app. Okay, so go to the next slide. I will probably like to show you a little bit of the code, but once that deployment is done, I will be able to click on any of these two links, and it should open up the app. So let's have a quick dive into the code. So here we've got a couple of repositories. As you guys can see, unfortunately, I could not use this one. It just wouldn't work for me. I still haven't, and I didn't have time to actually work out what was going wrong. Also, should I say right? But we've got this one instead, and it is a simple client-side Blazor which is hosted in ASP.NET Core, and I've got a shared. This is a typical project structure for this type of stuff, where you've got all your models and stuff in a shared project, and you got your server stuff where your controller and services are hosted, and repositories. And in this case, I do use a repository pattern, which shows you can apply all the known things that you normally would have done, and you can do it here as well. And I've got the C data. When the application starts up, the code actually makes sure that the database is created. Although the database is created in the actual infrastructure deploy, but it's empty, it doesn't have any tables, nothing. So when we do start up the application, we need to make sure, or use another process, which I could have shown as well, but I didn't thought of that, as to have a DAC deployment from code. That's another approach that could have been taken, but if you use something like Entity Framework, you can use what's the word called, migrations, to actually get your database in step with your code, and especially when you do a code first approach. And then your model, in this case, I've got two tables in my database. One is for the out of the box weather forecast demo, and the other one I just had a quick to do that I added a day or two ago, just to have something more than nothing. Okay, and then the client side is where all the actual magic happens. So you've got the index page, and oh, damn, now I gave away some of my secrets. Index page, and there's a counter page, which is the default. What do you call it? When you create a project from a template, that's one of the default pages, Ranger pages that's been added. Based on the authentication, this will always different between server side and client side, because the authentication models is a little bit different from one to the other. And then typical pages, this is the actual data that gets fetched from the database. And as you can see, this is authorized with the authorized attribute, which we are very familiar with in MVC applications. And the same with our to-do. We've got a to-do list. I have a to-do form, but I didn't wire it up. I didn't have enough time to do that. So very simple code and very understandable. And let's see how far our pipeline has gone. Oh, it is still busy, and we can see what's happening in there. Hopefully there's no breakages yet. That will be my day if it happens today. Oh, no, it's good. It's actually deploying the app already. As you can see, it got the source, the compiled code, got the artifact, deployment, the resource group, and the create the app insights key. And I will show you all these things in a second. So we can actually have a look and see here, what do we have? If we look at the resource groups again, I should have one resource group now. Yes, and there it is, magically appeared. And inside of this resource group, I've got all these components that's been generated for me by the infrastructure as code. Let me just make it a little bigger. As you can see, it's a bit too big. F11, yeah, that's better. So we've got a database, we've got a front door, we've got App Insights, and if you look at inside App Insights, we can then see if the API key has been generated, and yes, we have an API key generated. Generally when I do stuff like that, I immediately save into my key vault. Otherwise, like API keys is only available at the time when you actually create it. So you can then see in our key vault, I've got my database secret, and I also have my App Insights key, which has just been created for me. And now I can do, and if I keep this infrastructure for a long time, I will always be able to go back and find my secrets that I need for one thing that you need your API key for. If you want to set up dashboards in your DevOps environment, if you go in here, you can look at here. You can actually build dashboards. And if you add a widget, I'll just show something quickly. Let's see. I can't think of one now. No, what? Not that one. I don't have sprint tasks and stuff like that, so I won't use any of those. Oh, gee, I can't remember. I can't think of anyone. That's good. And I probably don't have the correct extension in here for what I wanted to see. Okay, let's not waste time on that. I should have installed the other extension. There's two extensions specifically for App Insights. One is focusing on actual telemetry, which is associated with the app, and I don't see it here, because I haven't installed it specifically for my environment. Sorry about that. Okay, let's have a look and see if our release is finished. Yes, and yes, it's green. It's magic. So let's go back to our wiki. And if I then go here, I can go into the actual app and find the links that I need. But if the naming convention works, if I click on this, it should just start my app. Oh God, I hope the demo god is favorable to me. Yes, awesomeness. Now, as I said earlier, I really wanted this to be a huge pizza story. but the demo gods always wins. Now, I showed you in code that both of these APIs are secured. So if I click on this, and as you can see, I'm not logged in. If I click on this, it should actually ask me to, why? Okay, so why does that page pop up there? My goodness. Right. For some reason, it didn't even bother much to authenticate me. But yes, it found me and this is done through Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and I may show you that as well. For this specific app, there's actually two app service accounts. One is for the client side, and one is for API access. Okay, so that happens the same for both of these APIs. Now, I've got an edit here, but I didn't wire it up. It's so sad, and I wanted to do that, to have that in code as well, so I can quickly deploy it and then make that to work. But I didn't have time to do that as well. And wow, and basically I've finished with what I wanted to show. And I'm sad, it's so quick. It went so quick.
It's a good presentation, though. We did have a question.
Hang on. I've got one more thing to show. Very important. Sorry. I talked about PWA, right? And look at this. Look at this. Do you really want to install this app? Of course I want. This is awesome app, man. This is the best in mother's milk. And there it is. Now it's installed on my desktop as an application. It's not, well, it's basically standalone, but it's still connected to the cloud. Now, that is the next step in this journey, is to make sure that your app can actually work off the network. And you can actually code for that using the little plugins that's applied to you from the template, and you can do all kinds of magic stuff with it. So yes, enough. I can't show my taskboard, can I? No, I can't. Can I? Hang on, let me see if I can. My desktop. 11. No, I can't. Sorry, but it actually installs the app in your desktop as with an icon, and you can also find it when you search in your application on your desktop to look for this application. So that is it. DevOps, Azure DevOps with Blazor app, client side in particular, and progressive web app installation. That's it. We're done. Thank you.
Awesome.
Any questions?
Now we did have a question. We had a question from Michael, and I see Damien has provided a really good answer for it, but we might also bring it to you as well, yeah. Johannes. So Michael asked, is the fully scripted infrastructure as code built into the pipeline combined with the quote unquote, when removing infrastructure components, we rebuild the environments? What make this immutable infrastructure? Okay,
so one of the things that I don't know how many people know how ARM templates work. ARM templates has let me just show. It's much easier to show than talk about stuff. So when you set up your release plans or your release pipeline, and you have a ARM template deploy, you then have to tell Azure how you're going to do this. Now, deployment mode is one of a couple. You can only do validation, or you do complete or incremental. Now, what does this mean? Obviously, validation only means it will only test your template that it actually works. It won't do anything other than that. Incremental. If something does not exist, which is in your template, it will create it. But if something is deployed already in your environment, and that is not in your template, it won't be removed. That is when it's in incremental deployment mode. So if it's in complete deployment mode, and sometimes if you have an infrastructure like I have, that's probably the the correct one to use. But I may need to change something in the future, add maybe another parameter to my app service, and I don't want to remove anything else, because sometimes when you do something like that, it removes everything and only replace it with what you add. So careful thought needs to be given in this step, is to make sure that incremental is normally a very good way to go, because it will not break anything, and it will make sure whatever is in the template is actually in your environment. So yeah, that is that. I hope that is a good enough answer. So I don't know what, I didn't see what Damien has said, but yes. So this is very important to understand what this does. And I generally like to use incremental. And if I need to make sure that I've removed something from my template, then all I do is I've got another template in my repository, which makes it easy for me then to also to do a delete. If I look at my architecture, and I think it's underneath this, scripts and delete all. So I've got this one, which is if you want to delete something, that's what you will delete. If you want to delete everything in your resource group, that is what you will deploy, empty template. So normally what I do, if that's the case, I will, if I want to make sure every time I deploy, which is pretty harsh, you don't want to do that, right? I don't want to remove everything every time I deploy. But if I made a major change, that's possibly one thing I want to do, is to remove everything and do a deploy after that again.
Great, thanks for that. There was Damien also just posted a request to share the link so everyone can install the app.
I don't think this will be accessible to them, to be honest.
Okay.
Should work. Should work, yeah.
Okay, let's try. Okay, maybe
you sign in. That's all.
Yeah. Where's that link? How do I get to that demo? I can't remember.
Yeah, that one there. The dots.
Oh, just this.
Open it in Chrome. Then copy it. Oh no, open it in Chrome. Go to the dots again.
Opening Chrome. And yeah. Just this.
Yep. Without the to-dos, yeah. That's it. Also, maybe it might be worth. So I'll let you paste that one. So
where do I post it in the question Q&A?
Yeah, just under my comment there.
Yep. So I don't know if it will actually work for you guys, but maybe it will. I don't know. Try that.
Have faith. It'll work. It'll work. And you can also install it. Everyone can install it, and you can see what it's like on your desktop. So it'll install in your computer. The other thing too that might be worth is just create a test environment step in Azure DevOps so people can get an idea of what the different environments are. So just do a clone your.
Oh, okay, my template, my deploy. Okay, I can do that. If I can find the right page.
We did have another question too.
Cool.
From Craig Lister. So he said, I've seen people hack around with that deployment code, the command line way of creating services, adopt database, etc. Is that all hand coded or is it generated? As that looks pretty meaty.
No, okay, my templates are all hand created. And that is, I mean, once you know how to do this stuff, it becomes second nature. That's harsh, a very tough thing to say, but I know what I'm saying. Once you understand ARM templates, and once you know Blazor, well, not Blazor, PowerShell, it becomes quite easy to do this kind of stuff. Now I'm just going to create a new environment, and I'll call it what's it copied to Blazor'ing'ly dev, but I'll call it something else. Let's call it test, TSD, and obviously now I will have to create a set of variables that will support the test environment. All right. So everything here, this is, I shouldn't have, that's bad. Okay. Don't do this. Don't do this. That's a secret. It should not be open. All right. Lesson number 1, keep secret secret. All right. So for this now, as you can see, we did create variables for test wherever it's appropriate. Because no secrets were violated, because my secrets are all in the release environment, that's quite easy. So all I have to do now then is anything that's test here, I need to make sure that the names are also called TSD, etc. That one, that should be staging. And the concept here is, if you've got a pipeline task group that's called Blazor'ing'ly dev, it will look for that scope here, and it will replace based on the scope of the template. Okay, and this one should also be test. And I will be surprised if this actually works. Yes, it will. Of course, it will. Okay. And TSD. I just need to make sure there's one more thing I need to, a couple of more things I need to change. Let's go back in the tasks. And we go into the test task. Here we must make sure that it's actually pointing to the correct resource group. So we need to create a TSD resource group, okay? Otherwise, things will go terribly bad very quickly. Okay, that's fine. And same here, we need to make sure that we go to the test key vault. And this should also be the test web application. That's why naming is imperative when you do this kind of stuff. Okay, let me save that. Now I just may need to make one more change.
I think I'll just pause you there for just a sec, Johannes. So certainly one thing that I would personally advise is see how Johannes has a single template deployment. Keep it as simple as possible. A single template is absolutely the way to go. Store it in your source control, which he has. And if you do that, then you're well and truly on the right path. Yeah, it's imperative to keep it simple. It's absolutely important. A number of people like to do multiple different steps for different things. Look, it can add some flexibility if you do it that way, but you're trading off simplicity for that flexibility. So assess what's right for you. My recommendation would be to try and keep it simple. If you can use one of the Microsoft reference architectures, which Johannes has. Actually, I'll paste the link to the Microsoft reference architectures. Yeah, that's always the best thing to do. Always try to use something that's already there. Don't reinvent the wheel. It's not worth it. So Johannes did it's now called improved scalability in Azure Web Application. So the heading's still scalable web app in the site, but that's, if you have a look at that link there that I've pasted in here, you can see Johannes has basically taken the key bits out of that reference architecture to make something simple work. And then that's, if you're doing any work in Azure, if you're deploying any website, I would strongly recommend have a look at the Microsoft Docs, that scalable web app architecture, which is fronted by Front Door, is probably the only one you ever need to use. If you want to have active, and Front Door's absolutely a great product to do active real-time failover, then there's a pattern in there as well. We use that for mission critical applications, but 80% of the time, this one here, it's simple, it's cheap, it works, it doesn't use anything fancy.
It doesn't fail. It just keeps on working. All right, so now I created a new release. This will, and the only reason why I did that because this part was not in the pipeline before. So if I didn't do this, you can't just create this. I could skip this one and just do this one, but I will let it go with the process. We still have a couple of minutes. And I'm quite confident we will have a test environment done before 7 o'clock.
Awesome. Well, we've got more questions if we're ready to move on.
Yes.
Okay. So Todd Whitehead asked, any thoughts on how you would do blue-green style deployments?
That's a tricky question. I don't like trick questions. Blue-green. I did that once.
So you can use the staging slots and then expand that out and publish it.
Oh, yes.
Blue-green is really good. Some of the tricks with the blue-green is managing state. So when you're doing a blue-green deployment, it's nice if the database is in a single state because you probably don't want to manage divergent database schemas.
Yes.
For blue-green. But if you have a common database schema, you can create a blue-green multiple ways. You can deploy different websites. So you can have complete different code bases, or with feature toggling, you can bring that inside your application itself, and you can deliver a blue-green experience where you're funneling certain users to certain types of user experience. And you can see that in Azure DevOps itself. Azure DevOps has the ability for you to toggle features on.
Yeah, what you could have.
There's a big variety, I guess. Yeah. You can do it at an infrastructure, you can do it at an application level.
I mean, if you do it in infrastructure, what I would do is I will have two slots here in production, nowhere else. Then I will deploy it to one slot, and if it works, I will then also deploy to the other slot. So that is another type of failover, if you like. So you have multiple slots, which then will automatically kick in if the other slots, for whatever reason, stop to work.
So and important, keep in mind that all of your traffic is going out via Azure Front Door. So having different slots or web apps or whatever you prefer to do, it doesn't matter. You can map that all through Front Door.
Yeah, and if you do that kind of stuff, obviously your pipelines will change. You'll have to have two deployments for one thing. Like for instance, you actually will deploy 2 web apps. So your architecture ARM template should reflect that as well. And you also have to then also set up your Front Door with that additional backend for in your backend pools. Then yes, it's a little bit of extra work. If there's a lot of benefit in that, maybe if there's a very viable use case for that kind of stuff, yes, definitely it is possible. Okay, let's see what happened in this pipeline. Not that one. Yeah. Okay, it's still busy deploying, and time is going to beat us.
That's okay. We're okay for time. We got more questions. So somebody, and Damien already sort of answered this one, but somebody asked if there is any thoughts on infrastructure differences or setup between Blazor server-side versus WebASM. And Damien said server-side Blazor requires Azure SignalR.
Oh, sorry,
Yes.
I should quantify that. That's if you're using front door, but I should also quantify if you're not using front door, you should be using front door. So if you're not using front door, there's more problems.
Yeah. So
Does that make sense?
so what we attempt to do in our ARM template is to always deploy what we may need. As I said earlier, if you actually deploy Azure Signal service and it does not get used, no harm done. It's not going to cost you money. Only when you start using it, will it cost you money. So if it's there, it's a good thing. So if you, again, as I said as well, if you really need to change a little bit things, a few things like having red-green deployment for your slots, then you can do that without harm. And then also, if we decide, okay, we want to add another application to this, we don't really need another server for it. We can just add another application to the app service plan, and you can all do that in your ARM template. And then with deployment has failed, I'm not surprised because I might have missed something. Wow, I've never seen this before. I didn't rename something. Okay, so and that's a good test. I didn't rename. Oh, that is odd. But yes, okay. So I did, and caution here, I did something very fast. I probably missed a step or two, but as you can see, it failed by trying to deploy the infrastructure. So if we can just have a quick look at the infrastructure, what has been created. Resource groups, we should have a new resource group. If I rename things properly, then it should be fine, but I didn't, obviously. And it created a lot of things. So the storage account is the one that failed, I think. And I know why. I've been a bad boy. Naming is important. Remember that. But I won't look at the what's the real issue now, or if you want to, I can. But I'm confident that I did not rename something properly. So let's just have a look at this. What did I miss? What did I miss? Did I miss something? Yeah, no, I don't think so. There, that's. You see? You see what I didn't do? That points to dev. That's supposed to be test. I forgot to change this. Okay. So Blazor'ing'ly test. Now if I redeploy, it will work. But if I may, can I?
Go for it. There's still a couple of questions left, so we might be able to get it done in time.
Yeah, okay. Let's release it again.
All right. Well, or did you finish answering the last one? Sorry, go.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So first, a couple of comments that aren't really questions. Craig Lister said that it works, which is the link that you posted, so we can see the Blazor app in our own browsers, which is good. I've tested it too.
Awesome.
Bertus, I think, is reminding you, Johannes, that secrets need to be in Key Vault.
Yes, I know.
And also that you can always nest the resource groups.
I know, but let me tell you, I don't like that.
Has nested resource groups been released?
Yes, it's been around for ages, but it makes things very complicated very quickly.
Okay.
I prefer not to do that. I would rather have dependencies in my template making it, because you can create any resource on its own. Nothing stops you. But if you create a string of resources in your template and you make sure that the dependencies is correct, like for instance, if I create a web app, I must have a service plan.
Nested resources or nested resource groups?
Nested resources. You can't have nested resource groups.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, you can't have. Sorry, that's not possible.
Yeah, that's probably what Bertus meant.
Okay.
But nested resources, like for instance, you can actually have a deployment plan inside another deployment plan, if you start understand what I mean, and you can do that with with your ARM templates. But as I say, I keep things simple. I want it to work all the time, every time, and with nested ARM templates, it becomes very nasty very quickly. So I stay away from that if I can. Yes, it's possible because it's there. You can do it.
Okay, awesome. Somebody said +1 for feature toggles. Launch darkly is great. And then we have one more question. Can you use a single front door entry IP for multiple applications, like different URLs or CNAMEs mapped? Are these priced as different route matches, or do you need multiple front doors? So there's a few questions there.
Well, a front door, it's naturally can have multiple custom domain names, right? So, and that becomes also very, very complicated quickly if you don't understand what you're doing. Yes, you can have multiple backends, which you can then associate a front end name with a back end in front door. Yeah, so you can have one front door, multiple applications. Nothing stops you.
Probably on that point, the most important question is you can definitely do it, not a problem. Azure supports it, but probably think about what you're trying to achieve first.
Yeah.
Front doors is such a cheap product that it allows you to move away from your traditional approaches and allows you to create a front door per application, which would give you complete application isolation and no coupling between different applications. It gives you the ability, due to its low pricing, gives you the ability to have such a high level of isolation that removes a significant risk that your CAD processes are there to protect you against. And once you're removing that risk, it means that you're able to move faster because you don't have those cross-application dependencies. So it's definitely possible to have multiple applications in the one front door. I'd strongly advise against it just because of its price point.
Well, not just that, as I say, I mean, the reality is if you need to write an ARM template for that, you have to make sure that you are sound mind when you do it. Because you are just working in plain text, there's nothing really validating it. It might seem it's working, but you might have not just not do one little thing right, and it will take you a long time to debug if you can't if it's not directly visible or standing out like a sore thumb or something. Yes, it's possible.
Perhaps a reason that people are bringing that application gateway mindset into front door is because of firewall rules. One thing that you can do that's pretty handy with front door is you can share the same firewall rule set across multiple front doors. So you're getting the centralized managed security controls around a highly distributed edge network. So there's possibly other benefits that may not be immediately obvious when you're using front door, just because of its price. It's not as expensive as spinning up application gateways.
Well, the main cost component of front door is your routing rules, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have a route rule per app. So there's nothing to stop you having multiple front doors.
Now, for some reason, this guy is waiting to queue, and it's been there for 3 minutes. And I know the reason, because mine is a private, a cost-free, basically, infrastructure. Sorry, not what's the word? Subscription. So I don't get priority service. Okay, I'm sorry to say. So this guy will probably, there it goes. There it goes. I've got you.
Awesome.
It will work this time. And just because I forgot to make the correct naming changes, yeah, you pay the price. The demo gods is kind to me. I'm so happy.
There's no other questions at the moment, except that somebody did make a comment that you're doing a great job. So,
oh, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
There was another comment, Dan, around EF context. That's probably it's an important one to mention. I can see it in the new place, and I can't. It doesn't seem to be published, but somebody has mentioned that they've noticed EF contexts get used in a different way between the server-side Blazor and client-side Blazor. And yes, you do need to be very careful with entity framework contexts with server-side Blazor. It's a bit of a catch. There's ways to mitigate it, but it's more surprising than you'd think. So with server-side Blazor, it will open a database connection per user.
Yeah.
So that connection will be stateful, and it'll run on the server. So it's a bit of a catch. So you just need to be aware of how it's managing that, and you need to code appropriately. It sounds a bit scary, but with a fairly simple web app and simple SQL Server, it'll scale fairly easy to 10,000 concurrent users, which is a fair size for most applications. 10,000 concurrent users is quite a lot, even with that scary concept of opening a connection per user. The trade-off with server-side Blazor is that every interaction goes back to the server, and it gets processed on the server, and the HTML fragment gets sent back to the client to be rendered on the client's browser. So there are trade-offs. The client-side Blazor has got a heavier footprint, so it does require a load time, but you've seen or installed the client-side Blazor application as a PWA, as Johannes has shared it. The actual footprint of that is not massively heavy, but there are considerations and trade-offs that you need to be mindful of depending upon your audience.
Yes. But considering that, because the client-side footprint is a little bit bigger, well, maybe a little bit of understatement, than the server-side one, it tends to load a bit slower the first time around. But once things are cached appropriately, it works very well. And also the considerations of actually enable offline support, make sure to read the docos and make sure exactly what you want to achieve, because the change in that little script that gets applied to you in the PWA flag, there's a lot of tips in there that you need to consider to make sure that your app actually can work offline. This one will definitely not work out offline. There's an absolute guarantee it won't. So don't try.
Okay. So the person who had posted that comment about EF context just added a little bit that said scoped transient doesn't work as expected when handling events.
Yes.
But otherwise, it's awesome form rapid prototyping.
Yeah. Well, it is awesome for production too. Trust me.
Yep. And Craig Lister says, just on the EF context, why would you have EF in a Blazor server app? Isn't Blazor similar to ASP.NET MVC? And you would have that maybe using a separate data access service, i.e. not in the Blazor project itself.
Yes, I mean, that's a programming style more than anything else. Yes, a Blazor app is in reality a MVC replication of some sort. So yes, what we tend to do is the actual component that's presented to the client does not have, we want to make that just a shell. So all the code, what we try to do, and in this case, I haven't done that. I just followed the basic template. We want to be able to say, right, we've got this application, we can run it as a Blazor server side or client side. And we don't want to change any code. There's a couple of caveats that I'm working on at the moment to be able to do that. But yes, there's a couple of things like the authentication is a little bit different between the two. So your app service, your app registrations does differ between client side and server side. There's a couple of caveats with when you use front door as well, and I'm busy finalizing the challenges with that now in my private environment because I don't unfortunately have the same rights in the business environment. And yes, all the above is true. Yes, we have an entity framework in a server-side server project, if you like, which isolated in totally, then have a service or a web API on top of that to make sure that your backend is actually totally secure.
Great. It looks like your thing has deployed.
Yes, it does. So let me see if I can access that. So that should be as simple as HTTPS TST Blazor'ing'ly dot AzureFD type AzureFD.net. Yes. Ooh, this Blazing.
I beat you to it. It loads.
Well, I must have typed something wrong. Yes, I did. Azure FD. Yes, it loads. I'm not surprised, am I? Of course not. I think that is it, guys. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to do this. It was awesome. I really enjoyed every minute of it.
Fantastic. I don't think I missed any questions. The person who made the comment about the single front door entry has come back and thanked us for a great answer, and the pricing discrimination around the rules versus front door was helpful, and is thinking more about providing a single entry IP for customers to whitelist in their firewalls. So +1 more for API gateway. Yep. Yeah, fantastic. So that's awesome. So thanks, thank you so much for a great presentation, Johannes, and
it's my pleasure.
You stimulated a lot of conversation. That's probably about the most question and answer activity I've seen in any of these virtual conversations for the last few months. So that's awesome work. You really stimulated some thought there.
That's very awesome. I'm very pleased about that.
And now, normally in our group, whenever we have a speaker, we appreciate all the efforts that they do, and we like to give them a little token of of appreciation for that. And just because it's a personal, a virtual event, we don't want to discriminate on that basis. Now, we did have an interesting thing that happened last time because our presenter was international last month. I tried to pass him a bottle of wine, but New Zealand Customs got in the way and exchanged it for a bottle of Sprite. So
Oh my God.
I don't know what that, but
What
let's
was it?
hope that, since we're local now in Australia, hopefully this will work. So there you go. So thank you very much. And I hope that
what happened?
worked. Look at that! It's been traded a red wine for a white wine. What's going on? Somebody's fiddling in it. We got to talk to the network people about that.
Yeah, that is the demo gods. I make a deal with them. I make a deal with them. If they don't interfere, they can take my red and replace it with a white.
Oh, that's fantastic. There you go.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Well, thank you again very much, Johannes. And as Damien mentioned, we do have an event lined up next month, so please drop in. And this event was recorded, so just give me until the weekend, but I'll get the recording posted on our YouTube channel and put the link in the meetup site in the comments for this meetup event. And usually we also post the slides from Damien's presentation before with the news roundup. You don't have a slide deck, Johannes, so there's nothing really to post for that. But the link to the recording of this presentation will be posted probably by the end of the weekend.
If you need, I can actually do screenshots for you if you like.
That's helpful. Whatever you want to share, I would recommend, Johannes, that you share it in the comments for the event on the meetup site.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah.
That'd be a great place.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed tonight, and look forward to seeing you, or kind of seeing you virtually next month. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.